Right. This is Michael Greenfield. He was born on July 24th of 1957.
Right.
He served in the Navy. His highest rank achieved was an E5. This interview is being recorded in Alto, Michigan. I know the interviewer through my brother. He is the husband of my brother's piano teacher.
Right.
And this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project. Okay, so let's start out. Where were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Did you grow up with a big family then?
I had a brother. I have a brother, and I have a sister, and mom and dad. That was it. Since you asked, my dad was in the military.
What did he do?
My dad was in. This is actually a decent story. My dad was in the Navy. My brother was in the Navy, but my dad was in during the war, and he was actually in day 2 of Omaha Beach. So he was a D2. He's still alive. He's been interviewed a couple of times here on the Front Lines of Freedom radio show. He's been on that show, and because he was there on day 2 of the Omaha Beach. He was on a ship called an LST, which are ships that carry troops and tanks and go right up to the beach, and they drop down a door, and everything drives out and hits the beach, and then they hope like mad that they can still go back and get back to sea. And he made non-stop trips back and forth from Britain to Omaha Beach till the war ended. So that was he was a gunner's mate. He manned a gun on board the ship during that whole war period.
Wow, so he's a surviving World War II veteran.
He is, yeah.
That's
93 years old.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That is incredible.
Before you enlisted for the service, what were you doing? What was your life before the Navy?
What was my life before the Navy? All right. You got to put things in perspective here. In the 70s, when I was in school, there were no computers. I know it's hard to believe there was no internet. There was no Al Gore, which didn't invent the internet. None of that was there either. And if you ever want to know what he did and were involved with that, I'd be happy to share that with you at some point. Anyway, so there was no IBM PCs, there was no smartphones, there was just like a calculator is all you had. And so I wanted to get a job. My dad was a mechanic, and so I had studied in school to become a mechanic. So I took like shop math, things like calculating gear ratios and power outputs. And then I went and saw my brother was working for a local company in Grand Rapids doing computer work. I thought, well, this is pretty cool, so I went and checked it out, really liked it. So I went in my last 2 years of school, I went to Skill Center, which means that I switched my whole curriculum at school then to start taking algebra. So I was like in 11th grade taking Algebra 1. Everybody else is in Algebra 3 or whatever at that point in time. So I switched all my curriculum because I decided that I wanted to go into computers in 11th grade, and in 12th grade I was going to Skill Center for that. But I got caught up in this little scenario where I want to get a job in the computer industry, but I didn't have enough experience. Even though through Skill Center I had been placed at Kawasaki Midwest. I did some work for them on the job training program. I worked for a company called X Computing Corporation, which was part of Lear Siegler at the time. And you get a little bit of experience, but you don't get enough experience to get a job. So I looked at the military as an option for me to go into to further my education in the computer industry, and also to be able to get the experience that I needed to be able to get a job. And since my dad had been in the Navy and my brother was in the Navy during Vietnam, and so the Navy was a natural choice for me to go into to pursue the education and the career in the data processing field.
Okay. So you said before when you entered, you enlisted, right? There was no draft when you applied?
Correct. Yeah, the Vietnam War had ended, and I was in this just after the evacuation period. And so there was no draft. And so I volunteered. I wanted to go in because I wanted to it's a patriotic thing. You're serving your country. Somebody needs to do it. And it also helped me, or I felt it was going to help me with my career as well. So it was something I volunteered to do, correct? Yeah.
Okay. When you enlisted and you heard you were going to get shipped off to boot camp, how was that experience for you? Was that was that really hard for you to adjust to from civilian life going to boot camp? And
Yeah, going to, well, first of all, the experience for me was this. It's different for everybody, but what happens is I signed up. I'm in high school at the time, so I'm in the delayed entry program. So I've signed up while I'm still in high school, and you have to go for a physical at Detroit. So I got on the bus. They put me on a bus. They shipped me to Detroit. You have to spend the night in a hotel. Now, as a high school kid, this is kind of a new experience because how many hotels did I spend, back then? And spend the night, and then you go through the physical process, which is an all-day event. It seems like you spend most of the day running around this place in your underwear while they do all this testing on you. And I ended up at this the very last event, and this doctor had asked me, had you ever had anything medical done to you before? And I remembered and I didn't want to lie because there's this big sign that says, if you don't tell all the truth, that you can go to jail and a big fine. And so I told him, I said, well, when I was a kid, I know that my parents had something, when I was a baby, they had to do something with my feet because my feet turned out. They didn't go straight like this. As a baby, they kind of splayed out. And so this doctor says, oh, you have club feet, you'll never be able to pass go through boot camp and make it through. And so he stamped me as not being approved, and he sent me back home and so I had to go get a letter from this doctor, which had since died, that worked on my foot when I was a baby. Now, so I'm 17 at the time, and my doctor is dead. So I dig up this paperwork. My mom helps me dig up this paperwork. So a month or so later, I get back on the bus, I go back to Detroit. It's like I have to go through the whole thing again, the whole underwear thing again, the whole day, and then I get to the point where they say, okay, well, let's see your paperwork from your doctor. And they said, you'll need to have an x-ray on your foot. I said, okay. I said, but the x-ray machine is broke down, so you'll have to come back.
Oh my gosh.
So I went back home again and scheduled it up with them, so I went back again, ride the bus, spend the night in the hotel. This isn't right in a row. This is over a long period of time. And do the whole thing again, get the x-ray taken on my foot. Yay, x-ray's taken, that worked, but the guy that needs to read it, he's not there that day. So I go back home. Anyway, so the fourth time was actually on December 16, 1974. And I remember sitting in Detroit, and these guys, these liaison guys were there, and I was just waiting, because I'd gone through the whole process now. I met with the doctor, he looked over the x-ray, he said, it's ridiculous. You've gone all this time without any kind of a problem. You won't have any problem making it through boot camp. But it wasn't approved yet. So I'm waiting down in this room, waiting and waiting to see if I can finally get approved to go into the Navy. And I remember these guys, these liaison guys saying, man, you must really want it bad, because anybody else would have said, heck with this. And so that was my story of just getting into the military. It just was a slow start. But December 16, the day that they finally stamped me in as approved, just happened to be my dad's birthday.
Oh, wow.
wow.
So that was kind of a fun thing to be able to remember when I actually got approved to go in was his birthday. And so my experience getting in was a challenge, but made it. And so then going to boot camp, which now that I think about, that was actually your question, but going to boot camp was, okay, so I hop on the bus again, and now I'm going to go to Chicago, but now you're going away, and you don't know when you're coming back. If you're coming back, you don't know when you're coming back. And so the other times I had gone away, I always knew that I'd be coming back the next day. I spent the night, and I'd be coming back the next day. So it was hard. It was hard to leave my family and to not know what experiences were coming up and to know when I am coming back. Am I coming back in 4 years? Am I coming back in 6 months? When will I see my family again? So I remember that was a tough experience. Then when you arrive in Chicago, because I went to Great Lakes boot camp, and so I remember by the time that the train arrived, it was fairly late at night, and everybody's happy, you know, hey, we're in the military, and they put us into this barracks. Yay, we're in the barracks, and they give you some sheets and things and said just make up a bed and hop into the rack, and you're with, you know, 50 other people at this point, and I think it was about 2 hours later they were throwing metal trash cans down the aisle, banging on the lids, waking everybody up, and it's like, oh man, what did I get into? What did I do here? You know, you go from hey, everything's happy, we're in the military, to now it's a mess. And so going through boot camp, they mess with your mind because they want to build you to be a team player and to have stick with it enough that, you know, you're going to be able to be there for them and to support and to defend the country and to be part of this team that's going to do that. And so they have to kind of break you down a little bit to get you to become that person. And so, you know, that was boot camp.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on boot camp? Like, when do you wake up? Like, what exactly would you be doing throughout the day?
Well, the first things that take place is that you go to a chow hall, and we still had hair at that time, so everybody laughs at you because they would call you a raisin. Back then, was the term, and so you were a raisin because you still had all your hair and you're just a newbie, and everybody else, you know, they've gotten the real uniforms on and they have no hair because they're veterans of boot camp now of a week, you know. And so a day was, and that was another thing too that was different for me, is that we got up at 5 or something in the morning, and you have to march everywhere you go. You have to march in formation, and you have to do stupid things. Like I had to watch an outside dumpster for 4 hours. I had to stand watch. Sometimes you'd stand watch in a parking lot to make sure that submarines don't surface. You know, like that's ever going to happen in a parking lot. But that's all part of it, right? You're going to go start doing things that you think are stupid, but you can't argue about it because that's what they want you to do. And you have to start learning that you are under control of somebody else. You've given up a lot of your rights as a civilian rights to where you follow the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You live by that code, and that's part of what they teach you in boot camp as well, is what are those codes, you know, as far as standing your watches and you know, the things that you have to do and the way that you have to do them. So they're breaking you down, building you into a team, teaching you the rules, and teaching you to do things no matter, even if it seems stupid. You have to go do whatever it is that they're telling you to do.
Yeah, so once you get through boot camp and you're fully done, you're done with training and everything, where was the first place you served? Like, where were you shipped off to?
All right, I went to Great Lakes for boot camp, but then I had signed up to be a data processing guy. So that was, remember, I wanted to be a computer guy.
Yeah.
And that's what it was called back then. It was a data processing technician. And so I went to, let's see, I got to come home for a week or so, and then I went to San Diego to go to school. So again, things have changed a lot, and maybe you've traveled a lot, but when I was 17, I had never been to San Diego. And so that was a whole lot of experiences of flying to San Diego and being put into barracks. So that's when you start to feel like you are somebody. Because in boot camp, you march everywhere, you salute everybody, you are a nobody in boot camp. And then when you go to what it was called then A school, which is the first level of school, that you are going through your training program now. Now you don't have to march everywhere. You still have to be in a certain spot, or you have to muster on a station at a certain time. You still have to show up on time. You still have to be part of the team that you're going to learn your program with, but you are starting to become somebody. You may have the weekend off and you can go down to the beach, whatever. You didn't do any of that in boot camp. Boot camp, you're always wherever they want you to be at all the time. So I went to A school in San Diego, and then when I went to school in San Diego, one of the reasons why join the military, as I told you, was to get experience to become a computer guy. But I also wanted to, maybe buy a camera system and stereo system. Things changed again, where now your camera's on your phone and your stereo's on your phone. But back then, they were actually separate products.
Yeah.
You could fill your room with this, the stereo equipment. So what happened is that the class before me, those guys all got sent to land-based, ports. And so I really didn't want to be there anyway, so I volunteered for a ship. And so they gave us a list of ships that they said were available for us to put in for. And one of those ships was the USS Mars. All right, which leads me to where I end up going, because I had, at the end of the school, at my A school, my training school in San Diego, I had filled out my chit saying that I would like to, as my first place would be the USS Mars, and then my second place was a different ship, because I didn't really join the Navy to sit in Cleveland, Ohio. That wasn't going to be a thrill for me. So I wanted to go someplace and get the camera system and the stereo and all that noise. And so I signed up for the USS Mars, and I had done some research on what the USS Mars was and what kind of a ship that it was. And I felt that would be an experience for me as well. The USS Mars, just because you'll probably ask, was a combat store ship. It's like a floating supermarket, like it's a floating Meijer store.
So was it like an aircraft carrier? Or a
No,
ship,
it was a supply ship, completely supply. One of the things we learned in Pearl Harbor, if you remember this, our ships were in port at Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese just had a field day with us to just drop bombs on us and to wipe us out, okay? So one of the things we learned is that we don't want our fleets to just sit in a port to be a target. So we keep our fleets out to sea as much as possible. Well, in order for them to do that, ships like my ship, the USS Mars, we would come out and we would supply all those ships with everything from like pineapples to leather jackets to airplane engines, okay, and even some fuel. So we were a ship that was quite a large ship that had storage areas, multi-levels of storage areas with big enough to run fork trucks all around, and some of them were frozen for frozen foods and frozen goods, and we would supply ships. We would pull up by one of the ships, they would come alongside on either side, and we would shoot a line over to them, like a rope over to them, okay? And then we had this winch system built into the ship to compensate for the fact that when you get a ship next to you, you get this Venturi effect and it starts to move you around. Anyway, so we would then, this line would go across, and we would tie on pallets around a net, and we'd put it on a pigtail, and we would just run these pallets of food over to each of the ships going alongside of us. So we would do pallet, 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 as well as we had a helo deck in the back where we had these big dual prop helicopters. They were, I don't know if it's Sea Knights or whatever they were called, helicopters that would come down, and we would tie a pigtail onto them, and they would go and do that ship. So we could do a ship right next door, left, to the port and to the starboard. That was called an unwrap, and then we could do vert wrap or virtual replenishment with our two helos to do other ships in the fleet as we're all together as a fleet going someplace. So we would go out and supply them with the frozen foods that they need, the dry foods that they need, with new supply of parts that they may need to have, like I said, shoes, whatever it is that they needed. We had all of that stuff on board, and part of our job as data processing people was to make sure that we had all the stock managed. So when we brought stuff and supplied stuff to the ships next to us, we would subtract out of our inventory the items that we gave to them. We actually gave them a bill. And so then we knew that when we would go back into port, because they would stay out to sea, we would go back into a port, and we would know, okay, we need 350 pallets of pineapples, and we need this many coats and shoes and whatever we just supplied to those people or those ships. We knew we had to order up and get back into stock on board our ship So the next time that we went back out, we would have that to resupply another fleet or resupply the same fleet again. So our goal was to keep them up to sea so that they weren't targets, and we would go back and pick up stuff and run back and forth to keep them fed and keep them going. So USS Mars, it was called AFS-1. Basically, Bill Clinton eliminated most of my Navy history, and the fact that my ship became a target that they mothballed it and eventually took it out and sunk it, so now it's a reef. And then when I was getting out of the military too, I had to, because the ship was moving all the time, to get all the medical stuff done that I needed to do to get out of the military, I had to go to a place called Treasure Island, and I think that's a resort now. And some of the naval bases that I was at are closed, and so my naval history is kind of wiped away.
So was all that stressful for you? Like all the different moving parts about it, was that stressful?
The moving parts of the ship moving around, you mean, or
yeah.
Well, I mean, here I am. I've never been on a ship before either, and well, I'll tell you about that experience. So I go to A school. I go to school for training on how to be a computer guy, and I was scheduled to come back home, so that was exciting. I get to come back home for a week. But somebody had muffed up my orders, and unfortunately one of the other guys mentioned it to me, so then I was obligated to not go home, but instead to go to firefighting school for a week. Firefighting school is where they take you and obviously you fight fires, and there's a lot of enclosed areas that you have to fight fires inside buildings. There are fuel fires. Anyway, so you learn how to fight fires. The other part of it is damage control, because if you're on a ship and you're on the middle of no place, you got to put out the fire. You just can't call the local fire department. And you have to deal with potential leaks that take place. And so part of this training that I had to go through was, you're in a room that had a room up above, and there's a hatch that you have to get to, but this room's filling full of water because this pipe over here is leaking, so you have to patch this leak, and the water's freezing. It just knocks the breath out of you to try to patch this thing. And so anyway, you're doing everything you can to put these different patches on in this room. Eventually the water gets high enough and you have to go up to the room above, which also has water on it. So they're trying to open up the hatch up above, the water's coming down, you have to go up. It's a training program. It's a firefighting and damage control school. So I went to that, then I got to come home for a week, and then I flew to Tokyo to meet the ship, because that was one of the reasons why I chose the USS Mars, is because it was based in Sasebo, Japan. And remember, I wanted to get the camera and the stereo system, and that's where that stuff was made at. So I flew to Tokyo. That was a long flight. That was an experience that I had never been through either. Really long flight. And you're by yourself, get your military garb on, your uniform on, and then I had to take a bus from there to another town, and the bus broke down, and you're young in the military. You've gone through this boot camp experience to where you're a nobody, to a training school which you start to become somebody, and now you're traveling, and things are happening wrong, like the bus breaks down, and in the military you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, or else you're AWOL, and that's never a good thing. And so, anyway, I make it to the ship, and so now I'm in this big thing, and there's all these guys, and for me, it was a different experience, because probably, I don't know, maybe 40% of the crew were Filipinos, okay? And just by that was a different experience for me. There was not a lot of Filipinos in the Grand Rapids area at the time that I was raised, and so for a while, and they all spoke Tagalog together, and so they would be speaking Tagalog, and I at times wondered if I had turned someplace and got on the wrong Navy ship, but that's just the way that it was. There was a lot of Filipinos on board the ship, and so that was, again, that was another weird experience to be going to a foreign country and to be on board the ship. And then the ship, we were home ported in Sasebo, Japan, and so life was kind of normal there. We had like a softball league that you could join. You still have to do your work on the ship, but at night, guys would go home to their families, you know, on the base. There was skeet shooting and go-karts and things that you could do on the base. But then we would pull up and go play Navy for a while and go someplace and supply some ships, and then we might pull into, like I've been to Hong Kong a couple of times. I was at a couple of different spots in Taiwan. I went to Thailand, the Philippines, a lot of times to the Philippines. I was close to Guam. We went right up to Guam and then went swimming, but we never pulled in. And it sounds glamorous to go on a swim call, but you jump off the side of the ship or you go down the bow and you jump in the water. And now what do you do? You're out in the ocean. You just tread water and then you have to climb up this big net off the side of the ship straight up for, I don't remember how high the side of the ship was, but it had to be at least 65 feet that you're climbing up the side of. And so, you know, that was sort of exhausting and seems, you know, anyway, so we went swimming off Guam, but so there was lots of countries that I had a chance to go to. I bought my stereo system and bought my camera system, but the problem is I did that all in like the first 6 months. So it's like, okay, I can get out now, but no.
So while you were serving, it was like, were you ever close to conflict or any? What was the most like? What was the biggest action like you experienced in the Navy?
The biggest action, I was very fortunate, because when you join the military, you don't know what you're going to get. You know, my brother went in during the Vietnam conflict, so he knew what he was going to get. My dad went in during the war, he knew what he was going to get. I went into a voluntary time where you didn't know. Any minute, it could be any kind of a conflict could kick in, but I was fortunate that a conflict did not kick in. So the worst case that I had was, my ship was leaving San Diego and we got hit by another ship. Tore a 60-foot by 40-foot hole in the side of our ship, which, you know, the steel on that is 1.5 inch thick steel, and just to tear open a hole. We had airplane engines floating out to sea. We had decks flooded, and so that was an interesting event because I was close to getting out, and you wonder, okay, is this it?
Yeah.
Are we going to sink now?
Was that an enemy ship or was that?
No, that was one of our own Navy ships, and it was the USS Cook. Was it the Cook? I forget the name of the ship now that hit us. But we were going this way, and they were coming this way, and they had switched from like a close radar to a long radar, and it was a really foggy day, and they didn't know we were there, and they hit us, and it rolled their ship quite bad, and the whole front of their ship, which was normally, you know, very sharp, was bent all the way back, and so then we limped our way back to San Diego, and they wouldn't let us off the ship for a while because, you know, they didn't want us to go talk to the press, and, you know, there was everybody around was following the ships come back into San Diego to get pictures of it, and so I had to call my parents and tell them, look, if you hear anything, I'm okay. Well, that's, you know, a mother never wants to hear, if you hear anything, I'm okay. But you're not supposed to tell them why you're calling. So my mom wrote down, I got a copy of the San Diego papers, and I still have that show the pictures of the side of the ship with a big hole in it. And one of our guys standing on the deck, he looks about this tall, and the hole's, you know, this big on the side of the ship. But other than that, there was no conflict. Fortunately for me, there was no conflict, and that's a really good thing because the guns that we had on board our ship, I mean, we target practiced at islands, and I think we missed. So if we had to protect anything, we would be terrible on my ship because that wasn't the purpose of our ship. We would go out with the rest of the ships that were meant to be able to hit targets, and we would supply them all the food and stuff, and then we'd go back to those bases. But those guys could hit the island, they could hit something on the island. Our guns were terrible and we couldn't hit anything. So no conflicts. I was very fortunate that I was able to serve without having to go through a conflict.
Yeah.
So when you served in the Navy, like, you know, you're working with a lot of different people, like you're meeting new people. Was there an element of camaraderie? Like, did you form a lot of friendships when you were there?
Yeah, you live with people. It's a 24-hour deal. You know, you eat, sleep, and work with the same set of people. You go out in town with the same people, and so that was a difficult thing, is leaving, because you've got 4 years with the same group of people, and as time goes on, some of those leave, and you get new friends that come in, and you develop a few years with them. So yeah, I think anybody that goes through an experience of the military and the time that you spend together, you have a lifelong friendship with somebody, as much as you can. One of the guys that was on board the ship with me lived in California, and when he got out and then I got out, we drove from California to New York, and he came and visited us here. We introduced him to some people. He got married to a young lady here, and
Oh, wow.
he moved here, and they had a child together here, and so he went from being his family in California to living in Michigan, and that's a friend for life. Is the people that you serve with are friends for life, because you would do anything for those guys. That was the other thing that's different too. Today there are more women in combatant situations. When I was in, women were not allowed on combatant ships. That's just the way that it was. Okay, and so things are a little bit different now, and I'm not sure how all that works, but well, it's different.
Yeah.
Because you go out to sea, I mean, you think about it. If you go out to sea or you go on a submarine, you're under the water for 6 months or 9 months or whatever. You go out to sea and you're gone for a year or whatever period of time that you're gone for. And if you're away from your family, it's difficult. And it's got to be different for the guys today that have both sexes on the same ship at the same time, because I mean, how could you be surprised that women get pregnant?
Yep.
Because guys are guys, and you're alone and you're away, and there it is. Togetherness.
So
You weren't expecting politically correct on this, were you?
when you were at sea, out in the
Yeah.
Navy, like going to all these different countries and having all these different experiences, did you stay in touch with family a lot? Like, was there a lot of contact with that, or was it brief?
Yeah, there was no internet, so there was no, let me text my mom or whatever. So what you did is you had letters, but you're out to sea. It's not like you pull up to the post office and let me get the mail. You get mail whenever you do pull in, which might be, letters become very important to you, because your friends at home, your girlfriends, whatever at home, your parents, you would get, you might get 10 letters at once, and then nothing for a month, because they're writing letters, which was nice of them to do. And they would get frustrated with me because they aren't getting letters very often. But if I had to write to several of them, that's a lot of letters I had to write. They're just, they're all writing one to me. I have to write a bunch to them, and they don't leave the ship for once every month, and so anyway, so yeah, so letters were important, staying in touch as best as you can to find out what's going on back home. I had a girlfriend that I had, or we had a very good relationship before I went into the military. And then when I was in, the deal was that she could see other guys, do whatever she wanted to do because I was gone. Anyway, she ended up, I ended up in the Philippines, and I thought, well, I'm going to use this military affiliated radio service called Mars, ironically. And my brother was involved with the Mars radio program, and what you could do is you could have a two-way communication home through like ham operators. And so you go to this station in the Philippines, and they initiate a radio call to somebody in Michigan maybe, and that guy in Michigan creates a local phone call to your parents, and so you get to do this long distance call for free. You just have to say over every time that you're done, so he knows to flip the switch from transmit to receive. and then you get to hear the other side take place. Well, so the one time I did that, I found out that my girlfriend had been in an accident and was killed.
Oh,
and so
no.
that was kind of a bummer of a deal. And my grandmother had died. And so my grandmother died, and then it was like 30 days difference was my girlfriend had been in this bad accident in a semi-truck, and the semi, she was going for a ride in this truck, and the truck didn't make the turn, and she fell out, and the truck landed on her, and anyway. So I, you know, my parents were kind of whiffling on should they tell me or not, and my mom wrote this letter to my captain of my ship and said, watch out, you know, if he has a, you know, in case he goes through depression or something. But again, and it's just something I always felt bad about, is that I'm living a life away, and so all I have is memories of people. And none of that changed by her death, because I still, internally, I still have the memory of what she looks like. I know what our times were that we had together were like. The games that we used to play at my parents' house all the time, you know, the different card games and things, the pizzas that we made. And so I always had all those experiences in my mind, even with my grandmother passing. And so to me, nothing had changed. Those memories are still there, they're the same. I understand that she's died, but I don't feel that. It isn't until I'm gonna go home and I don't get to see her that I'll actually realize that she's dead, and that experience will be realized. Otherwise, everything's the same. And so I remember at the time banning because I felt guilty because I didn't feel bad. Because like I said, all those memories were exactly the same. There's nothing had changed in my mind except for the fact that I've been told she's dead. Nothing changed. So I came home. Then when I came home and she wasn't here, that was a little bit, you know, that was more difficult. But yeah, so communication-wise, letters. There were no cell phones at the time. That hadn't existed yet. And no internet. So, you know, it was just letters and occasionally going home to see, you know, when you could afford to go home or you had time off to go home. Another thing I would do to save time to go home is they had this recruiter assistance program, RAP program, where because you're only allowed 30 days of vacation a year. And you don't make a lot of money in the military. At least I didn't make a lot of money. So it was expensive to fly home. And so what I would do is I would volunteer to go to the local recruiter station, and I would work at the recruiter station during the day, but I'd be home at night. So I could go with my friends and stuff at night. And then the next day I'd go back to work at the recruiter station. And that whole week did not count against my time off. And so then my 30 days that I had a year, I would be able to stretch that out longer, because each week I took a vacation, I would stack on a week of RAP duty. And so I'd actually be home for 2 weeks, but I only got charged for 1 week because I was working at the recruiter station for the other week. So anyway, communication was much different back then than it is today.
So all this time at sea, like you're away from your family, did you ever get homesick at all? Like have that element, you don't want to be there, you just want to go home or anything like that?
Yeah, homesickness was worse after a communication or after a leave. So like if I was to call my parents and talk to my family, then it was, right after that was always difficult. Because, or if I came home on vacation, going back was always difficult. You know, when you're busy a lot, you know, when you're working on the ship, you're working, doing your job, all the guys on the ship are your family. Those are, you know, those are the people that you live with and die for. So that's your family that you have. But as soon as you take yourself out of that element and either through a phone call or by arriving at home and put it back into, these are my parents, this is all the things that's going on in their life that I've missed, because their life has gone on and my life has gone on in two separate ways. You know, you have relationships, you play football, okay? Your parents go watch you play football. Well, if I played football, my parents had no idea that I played football. If they were off doing something that did not exist in my day. Anyway, so the thing is that we're like two separate entities going two different directions, and we live within our own worlds and we survive that way. But as soon as you join that together by coming home on vacation or by making phone calls, you start to enter into well, I wonder what they're doing today, and boy, I really miss my parents, I really miss my sister, because she's doing all these things, and I wish I could be there for her this event, I wish I could be here for this event, and they would feel the same way for me, because I would start to tell them stories and things that I'm doing, but they can't be part of that. And so it was actually worse to have communication, because then you and the guys are living your life together, and they're living their life together as my parents, my brother and sister. But as soon as you did something together, it brought it all back and made you much more homesick. It was lots of times I said it was better to not go home because it was a lot easier.
So, like when you're done with your service, you've served all your years. How was that transition? Was it hard coming back from Navy life to go back to home life, or?
Yeah, there was weirdnesses. Like again, you're on a ship, so there's a routine. Every day you're at a certain spot at a certain time to muster, to have attendance taken. Okay, you eat at a certain time, because if you don't miss it, if you don't make it on time, you don't eat. Chow hall is only open a certain time. So you're used to doing things on a schedule. And I signed up for college to go to Davenport College. And that was a new experience because my sister was a nurse, and so I knew that she had some college degree, some college experience, but for the most part, I didn't know what college was like, and I was still sitting on board the ship, and I was going to be getting off in September, and so I needed to be able to I needed to be signed up for college before I got off. And so the transition for me was to go from being all on my own, not having any kind of a regiment of, it's like I want to wake up at the same period of time every day. I want to show up someplace to get attendance at my dad's house, and what time is chow, and for me the weirdest things that actually happened were lightning storm or thunderstorms, because on a ship I never heard any thunder, and so when thunder would happen I would like fly out of the bed because that wasn't an experience that I had had for so long. But anyway, then I fell into this regiment, and I'll tell you the rest of the story as well. That so I wanted to have experience. I wanted to join the military to get the camera system, to serve my country, and to get experience in the data processing side. So I went to Davenport College, and it was Davenport College of Business at the time. Now it's the university. But I went there because I thought, well, I can at least get a 2-year degree. If I hate college, then if I can tough it out, at least I'll get that. Because I didn't know what that was going to be like either. And I remember arriving, and other than the fact that the very first day I got, and this girl hit me in my car that I had this 280Z, which you've never heard of either. It was a Datsun 280Z. It was a beautiful car, just a fun car, and she ran into it and dinged the whole side of it. That was kind of depressing. That was the very first day. But I started the intro of the school, so I'm just the beginning of a 2-year program. And there was a job placement office at the college, so I went to the job placement office and I said, hey, I need a job. And they kind of looked at me and said, well, wait a minute, you're just starting here. I said, yeah. And they said, well, we offer jobs to our graduates at the end of the 2-year program when you have all this knowledge has been given to you. I said, look, I got more experience and more knowledge than probably your teachers do here. So I need a job. And they got me a job. So I worked from almost the beginning of my college time at Davenport for a company called Seidman and Seidman, which it's a big accounting firm. And so I worked nights for them, and I went to school during the day on the GI Bill. And I had the GI Bill, which was given to me as a benefit. I didn't have to invest other than my time for 4 years. I didn't have to put money into it back then. You didn't have to. And so I received a benefit of so much money per month to go towards my schooling at Davenport. And so I worked at night and I went to school during the day. But I was able to get that job right off the bat because of the experience that I got in the military. It was worth that much to an employer to hire me as a vet. Yeah, so what happened was before the intermission, I had started Devonport College, and I was going to college, and I was able to get the job right away. And so I was working for this company called Siebman, a big accounting firm, and I worked there at night and went to school during the day. And so I was, but I was able to do that because of my military experience. If I had not gone into the military and had the 4 years of experience that I had, the training that I had, I wouldn't have been able to get that job. And that job led me to my next job, which led me to my next job. And eventually I've been self-employed for a long time in the IT industry, and it's all based on the fact that I was able to go to Skill Center. I saw a vision of where I wanted to go, but I needed to have experience to get there. The military gave me that experience, so I was able to start my career and to go where I'm at today. So if it wasn't for my military experience from an IT perspective, you know, I wouldn't be where I'm at from a career perspective.
So the Navy, it really affected your life, right? So
Yeah.
it pretty much shaped your life. Like what life lessons would you say you learned there? Like what skills would you say you took from the Navy?
Well, the Navy taught me discipline. Like I said, it is something that you have to be at a certain place at a certain time. You have to do things whether they seem really stupid or not. You have to do them. And to be dedicated to a project or to a team, to a person, to be dedicated to where you would do anything for that person if something happened, you're there for them. And you know, I think I'm a very patriotic person, even though I don't have a flag today. I'm an American. I'm proud to be able to say that I'm American. I have seen other countries. Even though America's got a lot of messed up things, most countries are a whole lot worse. And so it's always great to be back home to the United States, and it's always fun to visit other places, but it's always good to be back to the United States, and to be able to do something for the United States is a great thing, and to be able to stand up and fight. I was fortunate that I didn't have to fight. But to volunteer to be ready for if something did happen, I was glad that I could have that opportunity to serve.
All right, well, I think we're good.
We had one question left before the battery went dead.
Thank you for your service, Mr. Greenfield.
Oh, thank you.
So how would you say that the country's changed since your service? Like what's different?
Well, I'll tell you some other part of this too. When I was in, it was not popular to be in the military. Okay, even though I volunteered, I was not drafted. I volunteered. I remember when the ship I was on went from Sasebo, Japan, being home ported in Sasebo, Japan, to home ported in Alameda, California, and we went through an extensive repair time where we went to Hunters Point to get the ship all tore up and to get renovations made. But because we're in California, we were able to hop in a car and drive up to Lake Tahoe and to go skiing. And so I got to learn how to ski in the mountains. But there were people in Lake Tahoe, because we were obvious military, because we had, back then it was long hair was popular, and we all had very short hair. And so for example, the innkeeper, they didn't like us because they didn't believe we needed to have a military. And I remember this young lady being kind of, adamant still, because the Vietnam War thing was very bad for the way our military was treated from Vietnam. Our guys volunteered, our guys didn't have a choice. They went into the military, they served their country, they went through very bad experiences of having to kill people, to burn people, the drugs and all the mess that took place. Meanwhile, there's a whole group of people back still in the United States in their warm, comfortable houses and whatever, that are going through the love and peace time and the don't fight wars and anyway, when these guys that are told to go fight for our country and did do that come back, they get spit on, they get cursed at, they get kicked, they get things thrown at them because they represented the thing that these fluffy hippie type people back then did not really think that we needed to have. We didn't need to have a military. And so one of the great things I think that has happened, and even in just a very small sense, nothing like what the Vietnam vets had that, but what I went through was just people left over that felt we didn't need to have a military. They felt it was that we were unnecessary, and they were kind of down on us as men serving our country, even at Tahoe skiing. And but what is a nice thing now is that people today respect the military. I go to Home Depot now, I get a 10% discount. I go to Lowe's, I get a 10% discount. And what I really like is when I show them my ID card, they say, thank you for your service. That wasn't the case back when the guys were coming home from Vietnam. They were treated very badly. And, but anyway, so some of my time, we were not respected. I would say all my time, it really wasn't respected as a military, being in the military. But that has changed, and I think that's a great thing for America, because being in the military is not it's not a fun thing all the time. You still have to do what you're told to do. You have to fly a mission. You have to go out to sea. You have to be away from your family for long periods of time. You have to go under the water, or whatever it may be that you do. And maybe you have to kill somebody. And maybe you look at it, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's child, somebody's father. And it's tough to have to make that decision, to have to do that. But it's necessary, because there are people that are bad people in the world. And you also trust that our United States government makes wise decisions on who they tell you to have to go shoot. And so, it's like we have to be wise and vote in wise people to our government positions, because they are the ones that choose where we have scrimmages and where we have wars at. And we need them to be wise people to do the right thing. And that's what people didn't like about Vietnam. They felt, well, this is a stupid war. Why are we over there fighting for those people? And, that's their own problem, and let's not get involved. And yet, the guys that actually executed that, they didn't choose to go to Vietnam. They were told to go to Vietnam. So anyway, it is a different environment today, and I'm glad of that. I'm glad that the military is respected, because they should be. If you were to go down to the veterans facility down in Monroe, you'll see guys in wheelchairs with their legs up in the air, or legs missing and their arms missing, and psychological issues that have taken place because of traumatic things that they've seen, and the trauma that they've seen that have caused them to have psychological problems. You only have one life, and their life was given to the military to defend our country, to allow us to have freedoms that we have, to be able to say the things that we want to say, and have the rights to say that, to be able to own a gun because that's our right to own a gun, to be able to have the freedom to have religious beliefs. Even if we all don't agree on what all of those things may be, we still have those rights because of the decision, because the actions that our military takes to defend those rights. And yet those guys and women are losing their lives. They lose their limbs, they lose their life, and their life is in a hospital that, today you've been reading about different things that take place, how the veterans facilities are not well kept, and they're not getting the treatments that they need to have. And that's a shame, because they gave their life, they gave up that time, they gave up their lifestyle for the rest of their life to defend the country. And then when it comes down to the country helping them back with the medications that they need or the therapies that they need, we let them down by delaying it for months or by not giving it to them at all. And that's a shame. So hopefully that will get changed, and we can treat our veterans after the wars better. But it is at least nice that veterans are recognized today as good people, defenders of our country, instead of being spit on and felt like we're not worth anything because we're doing things that other people feel we shouldn't be doing. So I don't even remember the question you asked, if that was anywhere near the answer or not. But anyway, military was a good experience for me because, like I said before, if I hadn't joined the military, I would not have had the opportunity to go to college. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get the first job that I got out of the military, which led to the second job, which led to the third job, which eventually led to me being self-employed for years now, to owning my own company. I have an IT firm that I own, and I wouldn't have had those opportunities to be where I'm at today if I had not taken that step to join the military, to get that experience that I needed in the IT field to lead me through to where I am today. I wouldn't have the education, I wouldn't have the degrees that I have, and the college degrees that I have, if it hadn't been for the GI Bill, to be able to afford to do that. And so doors were opened up for me, and opportunities opened up just because of what I did to serve my country. And so I am proud to say that it was an opportunity that worked out great for me, and I had the opportunity to serve my country in the process. So.
Well, we thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Service.
Thank you.